The dust swirled around Rosalie Zimmerman's boots as she stood before the rough-hewn workshop. Her mother's body wrapped in canvas on the wagon behind her, and absolutely nothing in her pockets but 3 copper pennies and desperation. She had been traveling for 2 days straight from their homestead, 20 miles outside Loveland, Colorado. The August heat of 1882 beating down mercilessly as she'd driven the wagon with her mother's remains covered as best she could manage. Her father had died 3 years prior in a mining accident, and now her mother, weakened by consumption and a hard life on the frontier, had finally succumbed 2 nights ago. Rosalie had no money for a proper burial, no relatives to turn to, and no friends in town who could help. At 22 years old, she had learned to fend for herself, but this was beyond anything she had faced before. The sign above the workshop read, "Whitmore Carpentry and Coffin Making" in faded letters. Rosalie took a shaky breath, smoothed down her worn calico dress, and pushed open the door. Inside, the smell of fresh cut wood filled her nostrils. Sawdust covered the floor in golden drifts, and tools hung neatly on the walls. A man stood at a workbench with his back to her, planing a long piece of pine with steady, practiced strokes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing tanned, muscular forearms. "Excuse me," Rosalie said, her voice cracking slightly. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Sir, I need to speak with you about your services." The man turned around, and Rosalie found herself looking into the most striking pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, and a face that might have been carved from the same wood he worked with, all clean lines and honest angles. There was sawdust in his dark hair and on his simple cotton shirt. "Yes, madam," he said, setting down his plane and wiping his hands on his work apron. His voice was deep and gentle, with a slight Texas drawl that softened the edges of his words. "What can I do for you?" Rosalie twisted her hands together, feeling the weight of her situation crushing down on her shoulders. "Are you Warren Whitmore?" "I am," he confirmed, taking a step closer. His eyes swept over her face, and she saw concern flicker across his features. "Are you all right, madam? You look like you have been traveling hard." "I need a coffin," she blurted out, then felt tears spring to her eyes before she could stop them. She blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough over the past 2 days. "My mother passed 2 nights ago. I have her in my wagon outside. I need to bury her properly, but I do not have money to pay you. Not in cash, anyway." Warren's expression shifted immediately to one of deep sympathy. "I am very sorry for your loss," he said quietly. "Why do not you sit down for a moment?" He gestured to a chair near the door, but Rosalie shook her head. "I cannot sit," she said. "I need to get this settled. I can work for you in exchange for the coffin. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, whatever you need. I am a hard worker, and I will do whatever it takes to pay off the debt." Warren studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. She met his gaze steadily, despite the exhaustion and grief that threatened to overwhelm her. She needed him to see that she was serious, that she was not looking for charity. "Where is your family?" he asked gently. "Surely there is someone who can help you." "There is no one," Rosalie said firmly. "It was just my mother and me after my father died. We had a small homestead, but it will have to be sold to pay the debts he left behind. I have 3 pennies to my name and a wagon with a broken axle that I managed to prop up enough to get here. So please, Mr. Whitmore, will you let me work for the coffin? I promise I will fulfill my end of the bargain." Warren ran a hand through his hair, sending a small shower of sawdust floating to the floor. "Let me go see to your mother first," he said. She should not be left out in this heat any longer than necessary. Then we will talk about arrangements." He walked past her and out the door, and Rosalie followed on unsteady legs. The emotional toll of the past few days was catching up with her, but she forced herself to stay upright and composed. Warren approached her wagon and looked at the canvas-wrapped form with a solemn expression. "Do you have a place picked out for burial?" he asked. "I thought the town cemetery," Rosalie said. "If that is acceptable." "It is," Warren said. He turned back to her. "I have a cool cellar behind my shop. It will be better for her there while I build the coffin, if you will allow me." Rosalie nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you." Warren carefully lifted her mother's body from the wagon, handling the burden with a gentleness that made Rosalie's throat tighten. She followed him around the side of the building to a cellar door built into the ground. He maneuvered down the steps with his burden and emerged a few minutes later, brushing off his hands. "She will be safe there," he said. "Now about the coffin. I can have it ready by tomorrow evening. The lumber is already seasoned and I have most of what I need on hand." "And the payment?" Rosalie pressed. "How much labor will you require?" Warren looked at her with those steady gray eyes, and she saw something shift in his expression. "Madam, I am not going to take payment from a woman who just lost her mother and has nothing to her name. I will build the coffin and there will be no charge." Rosalie felt her spine stiffen. "I am not asking for charity, Mr. Whitmore. I am offering honest work in exchange for honest service." "I understand that," Warren said, his voice still gentle but firm. "But I am not going to add to your burdens right now. Let me do this for you, please." "No," Rosalie said, and heard her own voice tremble with a mix of grief and stubborn pride. "You do not understand. I cannot accept charity. I have nothing left, but I still have my dignity and my ability to work. If you will not let me pay you with labor, then I will find someone else who will." Even as she said it, she knew it was an empty threat. There was no other carpenter in Loveland who made coffins, and she could not travel any farther with her mother's body in this heat. But she had to try. She could not bear the thought of being an object of pity, of being helpless. Warren studied her for a long moment, and she saw respect dawn in his eyes. "All right," he said slowly. "I will make you a deal. I will build the coffin and help you with the burial. In exchange, you can help me with some work around here. I have been meaning to organize my lumber supplies and clean up the shop. It is not charity, it is a fair trade. Do we have an agreement?" Rosalie hesitated. Something in his tone told her he was making the work sound more necessary than it actually was, but his compromise allowed her to keep her dignity. She nodded slowly. "We have an agreement. But I want to do real work, Mr. Whitmore. Do not give me make work tasks." A faint smile touched his lips. "I would not dream of it, Miss Zimmerman, Rosalie Zimmerman." "Miss Zimmerman," he repeated, extending his hand. "We have a deal." She shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm and the strength in his grip. His hand was warm and solid, and for just a moment she felt a flicker of something other than grief and exhaustion. Then she released his hand and stepped back. "When do we start?" she asked. "After you have eaten something and rested," Warren said firmly. "You look like you are about to fall over. When did you last eat?" Rosalie tried to remember and realized with some surprise that she could not. "Yesterday morning, I think, before I left the homestead." Warren shook his head. "Come on. My living quarters are behind the shop. I will make you something to eat, and then you can rest while I start on the coffin. We will discuss the work arrangements after you have recovered a bit." Rosalie wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her with a wave of dizziness. She swayed slightly, and Warren's hand shot out to steady her elbow. "Easy," he said. "When did you last sleep?" "I caught a few hours in the wagon last night," she admitted. "That settles it," Warren said. "Food and rest first. Everything else can wait." He guided her around to the back of the building where a small but tidy cabin stood. Inside, it was sparse but comfortable with a wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, a bed in one corner, and shelves lined with books. Rosalie was surprised by the books. She had not expected a carpenter to be a reader. Warren saw her looking at them. "My mother was a school teacher," he explained as he stoked up the fire in the stove. "She made sure all her children could read and write. Sit down, Miss Zimmerman." Rosalie sank into one of the chairs, feeling the exhaustion wash over her now that she had stopped moving. She watched as Warren moved efficiently around his small kitchen, slicing bread and cheese, pouring water from a pitcher, and setting everything in front of her. "Eat," he said simply. She did, and the food tasted better than anything she could remember. Warren sat down across from her with his own plate and ate in companionable silence, not pressing her with questions or sympathy. She appreciated that more than she could say. When she had finished, she found her eyelids growing heavy despite herself. Warren stood up and gestured to his bed. "You can rest there. I will be in the shop working. Take as long as you need." "I cannot take your bed," Rosalie protested weakly. "You can and you will," Warren said. "I will be working through the night anyway. I want to finish the coffin as quickly as possible so we can lay your mother to rest." Rosalie felt tears prick her eyes again at his kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. Warren nodded and left the cabin, closing the door quietly behind him. Rosalie sat for a moment longer, then gave in to her exhaustion. She lay down on the bed, which smelled faintly of wood smoke and pine, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and she could hear the steady sound of sawing from the workshop. She sat up, momentarily disoriented, then remembered where she was. She had slept through the entire afternoon and night. It was morning now. Rosalie stood up quickly, smoothing down her rumpled dress and trying to tidy her hair with her fingers. She needed to get to work. She had made a bargain and she intended to keep it. She found Warren in the workshop, sanding a beautifully crafted coffin. He had clearly been working through the night, as he had said he would. His eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, but his hands were steady as they moved over the smooth wood. "Mr. Whitmore," Rosalie said from the doorway, "you should have woken me. You have been working all night." He looked up and gave her a tired smile. "You needed the rest more than I needed help. How are you feeling?" "Better," she admitted. "And guilty that you have been working while I slept." "Do not feel guilty," Warren said, setting down his sandpaper. "I am almost finished here. Just need to add a few final touches. I thought we could have the burial this evening if that suits you." "It does," Rosalie said. "And now I want to start on my end of the bargain." "What do you need me to do?" Warren hesitated, then gestured to the far wall where lumber was stacked in a haphazard pile. "I really could use help sorting that lumber by size and type. It has been a mess for months and I keep meaning to organize it. If you could do that, it would be genuinely helpful." Rosalie rolled up her sleeves. "Consider it done." She spent the rest of the morning working on the lumber, sorting the different types of wood and arranging them by length and width. It was hard physical labor, but she welcomed it. It kept her mind occupied and her hands busy. Warren worked on finishing the coffin and they fell into a comfortable rhythm, working side by side in companionable silence. Around midday, Warren went into his cabin and returned with bread, cold meat, and apples. They ate together at his workbench, and Rosalie found herself studying him more closely. He had strong, capable hands with long fingers, and there was a quiet competence about him that she found reassuring. His face was weathered from sun and wind, but his eyes were kind. "How long have you been in Loveland?" she asked, breaking the silence. "About 5 years," Warren said. "I came up from Texas after my parents died. My older brother inherited the family ranch, and I wanted to make my own way. I had always been good with woodworking, so I apprenticed with a carpenter in Denver for a year, then came here to set up my own shop. Do you like it here? Rosalie asked. Warren considered the question. I do. It is a good town, good people. The work is steady. What about you? Have you lived here long? My whole life, Rosalie said. My father came out here in the 50s to try mining, met my mother in Denver, and they settled on a homestead outside town. It was a hard life, but they made it work. Until my father died anyway. After that, it was just my mother and me trying to keep the place going. We managed for a while, but the debts piled up and my mother's health declined. Now I will have to sell the land just to pay what we owe. What will you do after that? Warren asked gently. Rosalie had been trying not to think about that question. I am not sure, she admitted. I will need to find work somewhere, maybe as a housekeeper or a cook. I can sew reasonably well. There must be something. Warren was quiet for a moment, then said, There is always work for people who are willing to do it. You will find your way. His confidence in her, despite barely knowing her, warmed something in Rosalie's chest. Thank you, she said. They returned to work, and by late afternoon the lumber was neatly organized and the coffin was complete. It was a beautiful piece of work, simple but elegant, with clean lines and a smooth finish. Rosalie ran her hand over the lid, feeling the care that had gone into every inch of it. It is beautiful, she said softly. My mother would have appreciated it. I am glad, Warren said. Should we prepare for the burial now? Rosalie nodded, steeling herself. This would be the hardest part, saying her final goodbye, but she was grateful that Warren would be there with her. She did not think she could face it alone. They carried the coffin to the cellar and carefully placed her mother's body inside. Rosalie had brought her mother's best dress, a simple gray cotton that she had worn to church, and she dressed her mother with trembling hands. Warren stepped outside to give her privacy, returning only when she called for him. Together, they loaded the coffin onto Warren's wagon. He had 2 strong draft horses, and they made the journey to the cemetery on the edge of town. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The cemetery was peaceful, with a few scattered headstones and a white fence surrounding it. Warren had already arranged for the grave to be dug, and they found the spot waiting, a dark rectangle in the earth beneath a cottonwood tree. With the help of 2 men from town whom Warren had enlisted, they lowered the coffin into the ground. Rosalie stood at the edge of the grave, her hands clasped in front of her, and tried to find words. My mother was a good woman, she said, her voice breaking. She worked hard her whole life. She loved my father deeply and never complained about the hardships. She taught me to be strong, to be honest, and to always keep my word. I will miss her every day for the rest of my life. Her voice failed her then, and tears streamed down her face. She felt Warren's presence beside her, solid and steady. He did not touch her or try to comfort her with empty words. He simply stood with her as she said goodbye. The 2 men filled in the grave while Rosalie watched, each shovelful of earth feeling like a weight on her heart. When it was done, Warren thanked the men and they departed, leaving Warren and Rosalie alone in the gathering dusk. I will make her a headstone, Warren said quietly. No charge, it is the right thing to do. Rosalie turned to look at him, this man who was showing her such unexpected kindness. Why are you doing all this? She asked. You do not know me, you do not owe me anything. Warren met her eyes. Because it is what anyone should do, he said simply. Because no one should have to face something like this alone, and because I can see you are a good person who has had more than your share of hardship. Sometimes we help people because we can, not because we expect anything in return. Fresh tears spilled down Rosalie's cheeks, but these were different. They were tears of gratitude and relief. "I do not know how to thank you," she whispered. "You do not need to thank me," Warren said. "Come on, let me take you back to town. You can stay in my cabin tonight, and tomorrow we will figure out what comes next." They rode back to Loveland in silence as the stars began to appear overhead. Rosalie felt hollowed out by grief, but also strangely peaceful. Her mother was at rest, buried properly, and that was more than she had dared hope for when she had arrived in town. Back at Warren's cabin, he insisted she take the bed again while he made up a bedroll on the floor. Rosalie was too exhausted to argue. She lay in the darkness, listening to Warren's steady breathing, and felt a sense of safety she had not felt in a long time. The next morning, Rosalie woke to the smell of coffee brewing. She got up and found Warren at his small stove, cooking eggs and bacon in a cast-iron skillet. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you are hungry." "I am," Rosalie said, surprised to find it was true. They ate breakfast together, and Rosalie marveled at how natural it felt, sharing a meal with this man she had only met yesterday. "I have been thinking about your situation," Warren said as they finished eating, "and I have a proposition for you." Rosalie set down her coffee cup and gave him her full attention. "My business has been growing," Warren continued. "I could use help with more than just organizing lumber. I need someone who can handle the books, deal with customers, help with finishing work on the furniture I make. If you are interested, I could hire you as my assistant. I can pay you a small wage and you could stay in the cabin. I can sleep in the workshop. It has a back room that I could fix up." Rosalie stared at him. "Are you offering me a job?" "I am," Warren said. "A real job, not charity. I genuinely need the help and you need work. It seems like a solution that would benefit us both." "But you barely know me," Rosalie protested. "What if I am not good at the work?" "I think you will be," Warren said confidently. "You are smart, you are a hard worker, and you keep your word. That is all I need." Rosalie felt hope flutter in her chest, fragile as a bird. "Are you certain about this?" "I am," Warren said. "What do you say, Miss Zimmerman? Do you want to work for me?" Rosalie thought of the alternative, selling the homestead, trying to find work in a town where she knew no one, struggling to make ends meet. This offer was more than she could have hoped for. "Yes," she said. "I accept. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." "Warren," he corrected with a smile. "If we are going to be working together, you should call me Warren." "Then you should call me Rosalie," she said, feeling a smile tug at her own lips for the first time in days. "Rosalie," Warren repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. They shook hands on the deal, and Rosalie felt the calluses on his palm again, the strength and warmth of his grip. When their hands parted, she felt a strange reluctance to let go. Over the following weeks, Rosalie settled into her new life. She moved into Warren's cabin while he fixed up the back room of his workshop with a cot and a few pieces of furniture. She learned the ins and outs of his business, discovering that she had a knack for keeping the books organized and dealing with customers. She also helped with finishing work, sanding and oiling the furniture Warren crafted. They fell into an easy partnership, working side by side through the long summer days. Warren taught her about different types of wood and how to spot quality lumber. She taught him a more efficient system for tracking orders and managing inventory. But more than that, they talked. During breaks from work, over meals, in the quiet evenings after the shop closed, they shared their stories. Warren told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about his parents who had died in a cholera outbreak, about his dreams of building a successful business. Rosalie told him about her childhood on the homestead, about her father's infectious optimism that had never quite been rewarded, about her mother's quiet strength. Rosalie found herself looking forward to these conversations more and more. She liked Warren's dry sense of humor, the way he listened intently when she spoke, the thoughtful way he considered questions before answering. She liked watching him work, the careful precision of his movements, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. And sometimes, she caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and intent in those gray eyes. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch of the cabin watching the sun set over the mountains, Warren said, "I need to go to Denver next week to meet with a lumber supplier. Would you be willing to come along? I could use your help negotiating the prices." Rosalie looked at him in surprise. "You want me to help with negotiations? You have a good head for numbers and you are not afraid to stand your ground," Warren said. "I think you would be an asset." Rosalie felt a warm glow of pride at his words. "I would be happy to come." The trip to Denver took most of a day by wagon. They left early in the morning, with the mountains silhouetted against the dawn sky. It was Rosalie's first time traveling anywhere in months, and she found herself enjoying the journey despite the bumpy road. Warren was good company, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area. When they stopped to rest the horses at midday, he produced a basket of food he had packed: bread, cheese, apples, and even a small jar of pickles. "You thought of everything," Rosalie said, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I try," Warren said with a grin that made her heart skip a beat. They reached Denver by late afternoon and checked into a modest but respectable hotel. Warren had reserved 2 separate rooms, which Rosalie appreciated. She might be working for him and living in his cabin, but propriety still mattered. The next morning, they met with the lumber supplier, a gruff man named Henderson who clearly tried to take advantage of what he perceived as a young carpenter with limited experience. But Rosalie had done her research, asking around about fair prices before they left Loveland, and she was not about to let Warren be cheated. "Those prices are higher than what you quoted last time," she said firmly, looking Henderson in the eye. "And higher than what Johnson Lumber in Colorado Springs is charging. If you cannot give us a fair price, we will take our business elsewhere." Henderson blustered, but eventually agreed to reduce his prices. Warren negotiated the final terms, and they left with a deal that would save Warren a significant amount of money over the next year. "That was impressive," Warren said as they walked back through the busy Denver streets. "You were not intimidated by him at all." "He was trying to cheat you," Rosalie said indignantly. "I was not going to let that happen." Warren stopped walking and turned to face her. There was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "Thank you," he said softly, "for looking out for me." "We are partners," Rosalie said, her voice coming out quieter than she intended. "Of course I look out for you." They stood there for a moment on the busy street, people flowing around them, and Rosalie felt something shift between them. It was as if a door had opened, revealing something that had been growing quietly between them all these weeks. Warren seemed to feel it too. His hand moved as if to reach for hers, then fell back to his side. "We should get back to the hotel," he said, his voice a little rough. "It is getting late." That evening, they had dinner together in the hotel dining room. It was a nicer meal than either of them was used to, with white tablecloths and candles on the tables. Rosalie had put on her best dress, the green calico she had been saving, and Warren had put on a clean shirt and his good jacket. "This is nice," Rosalie said, looking around at the elegant room. "It has been a long time since I had a proper meal in a place like this." "You look beautiful," Warren said suddenly, then seemed startled by his own words. A flush crept up his neck. "I mean, that is a very nice dress." Rosalie felt her own cheeks warm. "Thank you," she said softly. "You look quite handsome yourself." Their eyes met across the table, and Rosalie felt her heart begin to race. There was no mistaking the look in Warren's eyes now. It was desire and tenderness and hope all mixed together. "Rosalie," he said, his voice low and intense, "I need to tell you something. These past few weeks, working with you, getting to know you, they have been the best weeks of my life. You are smart and strong and kind, and I find myself thinking about you all the time. I know it might be too soon, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I need you to know that I have feelings for you. Deep feelings." Rosalie's heart soared. "Warren," she breathed, "I feel the same way. I have been trying not to because it seemed too fast, too complicated. But I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel safe and happy. You make me laugh. You challenge me to be better. I think I am falling in love with you." Warren's face broke into a wide smile, the most genuine, unguarded expression she had seen from him. He reached across the table and took her hand, and this time neither of them let go. "I am falling in love with you too," he said. "I think I have been since the day you walked into my shop and insisted on trading labor for a coffin. You were so proud and determined, even in the middle of such grief. I admired you immediately." "I thought you were the kindest man I had ever met," Rosalie confessed. "Building that coffin, helping me through the burial, offering me a job. No one had ever shown me that kind of compassion." "You deserved it," Warren said fiercely. "You deserve every good thing, Rosalie." They finished their dinner in a haze of happiness, hands clasped across the table, talking and laughing and simply reveling in the joy of acknowledged feelings. When they finally returned to their separate rooms that night, Warren walked Rosalie to her door. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please," Rosalie whispered. Warren cupped her face in his hands, those strong, gentle carpenter's hands, and kissed her softly. His lips were warm and firm against hers, and Rosalie felt herself melt into the kiss. It was sweet and tender and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Warren rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "So have I," Rosalie said. "Warren, what happens now? Now we go back to Loveland," Warren said, "and we figure this out together, if you want to, that is." "I want to," Rosalie said firmly, "more than anything." They kissed once more, lingering this time, before reluctantly parting for the night. Rosalie lay awake in her hotel bed, too happy to sleep, replaying every moment of the evening in her mind. The next day, they traveled back to Loveland, but this time the journey felt different. Warren kept finding excuses to touch her hand, to brush a strand of hair from her face, to smile at her with those warm gray eyes. Rosalie felt like she was glowing from the inside out. Back in Loveland, they settled into their new dynamic. They continued working together during the day, but now their partnership had an extra layer of intimacy. Warren would drop kisses on her forehead as he passed her desk. Rosalie would rest her hand on his shoulder as she looked over his work. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, Warren's arm around her shoulders, talking about their days and their dreams for the future. Warren was courting her properly, Rosalie realized. Despite living in close quarters, he was respectful of her virtue, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. He brought her wildflowers he picked on his way back from deliveries. He carved her a beautiful jewelry box from cherry wood. He read to her in the evenings from his collection of books. Rosalie found herself falling deeper in love with him every day. She loved his steady presence, his quiet humor, his generous heart. She loved the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. She loved how he valued her opinions and treated her as an equal partner in the business. October turned to November, and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the cabin, Warren turned to her with a serious expression. "Rosalie, I need to talk to you about something," he said, Rosalie's heart skipped nervously. "What is it?" Warren took both her hands in his. "I know we have only known each other for a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Rosalie. I want to spend my life with you. I want to build a future together, raise a family, grow old together. Will you marry me?" Rosalie felt tears spring to her eyes, but these were happy tears. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Warren, I will marry you. I love you so much." Warren pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Rosalie poured all her love and happiness into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "I do not have a ring yet," Warren admitted. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you would say yes before I invested in one." "I do not need a ring," Rosalie said. "I just need you." "You will have both," Warren promised. "We will go to the jeweler tomorrow and pick one out together." They spent the rest of the evening making plans. They would have a simple wedding in the town church, just a few friends and neighbors as witnesses. Warren would expand the cabin to make room for a family. Rosalie would continue working in the business, at least until children came along. "I want to make you happy," Warren said seriously, holding her close. "I want to give you the life you deserve." "You already make me happy," Rosalie assured him. "Every single day." True to his word, Warren took her to the jeweler the next day and they selected a simple gold band with a small sapphire. It was not an expensive ring, but Rosalie loved it because Warren had chosen it with such care, making sure it was something she would want to wear forever. They set the wedding date for December 15th, giving them just over a month to prepare. It did not take long to make the arrangements for such a simple ceremony, but Rosalie wanted everything to be perfect. She sewed herself a new dress from cream-colored wool, working on it in the evenings by lamplight. Warren built them a new bed frame, larger than the single bed in the cabin, crafting it from oak with a beautiful carved headboard. They were both preparing for their new life together with eager anticipation. The night before the wedding, Rosalie visited her mother's grave for the first time since the burial. Warren had finished the headstone, a beautiful piece of carved granite with her mother's name and dates. Rosalie knelt beside the grave, her hands clasped in front of her. "Mama," she said softly, "I wish you could be here tomorrow. I wish you could meet Warren. I think you would like him. He is a good man, a kind man. He makes me happy, Mama. I know you worried about me, about what would happen to me after you were gone, but I am going to be all right, more than all right. I am going to have a good life with a man who loves me. I hope you can be happy for me, wherever you are." She felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up to find Warren standing behind her. He had followed her, wanting to make sure she was all right. "I was just telling my mother about you," Rosalie said, standing up and leaning into his embrace. "What did you tell her?" Warren asked gently. "That you are a good man who makes me happy," Rosalie said. "That I am grateful every day that I walked into your shop that awful morning." "I am grateful too," Warren said. "I am grateful you needed a coffin, grateful you were too proud to accept charity, grateful for every moment that led to us being here together." They stood together in the cemetery as the sun set, holding each other, ready for whatever the future would bring. The next day dawned clear and cold, the kind of perfect December day where the sky is impossibly blue and everything seems to sparkle. Rosalie woke early, her stomach full of nervous butterflies. She was getting married today. She was going to become Mrs. Warren Whitmore. She took extra care getting ready, pinning up her red gold hair in a style she had practiced several times, and putting on her new cream dress. She had no jewelry except the sapphire engagement ring, but she did not need any. She felt beautiful and happy, and that was enough. The ceremony was held in the small white church on Main Street, with about 24 people in attendance. Warren's face when he saw her walking down the aisle made Rosalie's heart skip. He looked at her like she was everything he had ever wanted, and she felt the same way about him. The minister kept the ceremony brief and simple. They exchanged their vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all the days of their lives. Warren slipped a gold wedding band on her finger to match the engagement ring, and she slipped one on his. Then the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Warren kissed her to the applause of their small gathering of friends and neighbors. Afterward, they held a simple reception in the church hall, with cake and coffee and well wishes from the community. Rosalie was touched by how many people came to celebrate with them, people who had been strangers to her just a few months ago but who now felt like friends. As evening fell, Warren drove them back to the cabin in his wagon, now officially their home together. He carried her over the threshold, making her laugh, and set her down gently inside. The cabin felt different now, transformed from a temporary shelter into their real home. Warren had spent the past few days making it special, adding curtains to the windows, bringing in a new rug for the floor, and filling vases with pine boughs that made everything smell fresh and clean. "Welcome home, Mrs. Whitmore," Warren said, pulling her into his arms. "I love the sound of that," Rosalie said, smiling up at him. "Mrs. Whitmore, your wife." "My wife," Warren repeated as if testing out the words. "My beautiful, brilliant, amazing wife." He kissed her then, and this kiss was different from all the ones that had come before. It was deeper, more passionate, full of promise and desire. Rosalie kissed him back with equal fervor, wrapping her arms around his neck and pressing herself against him. Warren swept her up in his arms and carried her to their new bed, and that night they truly became husband and wife in every sense. Warren was gentle and patient, taking his time to make sure Rosalie felt safe and cherished. It was everything Rosalie had hoped it would be and more, a physical expression of the love they felt for each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, Rosalie's head on Warren's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Warren murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "So much." Rosalie fell asleep feeling completely happy and completely loved, secure in the knowledge that she had found her home. The winter months passed in a blur of happiness. Rosalie and Warren settled into married life, working together during the day and enjoying their evenings together. The business continued to grow, with more and more customers coming to Warren's shop for furniture and carpentry work. In January, Rosalie realized that she had not had her monthly courses. She waited another week to be sure, then cautiously told Warren her suspicion. His face lit up with joy. "Are you saying you might be pregnant?" "I think I might be," Rosalie said, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. "It is too early to be certain, but all the signs are there." Warren pulled her into a tight embrace. "That is wonderful news. We are going to have a baby." "You are happy about it?" Rosalie asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy, I am thrilled," Warren said. "I cannot wait to be a father. To raise a family with you." As the weeks passed and Rosalie's pregnancy became more certain, Warren became even more attentive and protective. He insisted she stop doing heavy work in the shop, taking over the physical labor himself. He made sure she ate well and rested often. He would talk to her growing belly in the evenings, telling their unborn child stories and making Rosalie laugh with his earnest one-sided conversations. Spring came, bringing new growth and new life. Rosalie's belly swelled with their child, and she felt the first flutters of movement that gradually became stronger kicks. Warren would place his hand on her belly in wonder, feeling their baby move. "Have you thought about names?" he asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I have some ideas," Rosalie said. "If it is a girl, I would like to name her after my mother, Catherine. If it is a boy, perhaps something strong. What do you think?" "I think Catherine is a beautiful name," Warren said. "And if it is a boy, what about William? That was my father's name." "Catherine or William," Rosalie said, trying out the names. "I like them both." As summer approached and Rosalie grew larger, she had to stop working in the shop entirely. She spent her days keeping house, sewing baby clothes and preparing for their new arrival. Warren had built a beautiful cradle from cherry wood, with intricate carvings of birds and flowers on the sides. In late August, as the summer heat grew oppressive, Rosalie woke in the middle of the night with the first contractions. She shook Warren awake. "Warren, I think it is time." He was on his feet immediately, alert despite having been sound asleep moments before. "I will get the midwife. Will you be all right here for a few minutes?" "I will be fine," Rosalie assured him, though her voice was tight with pain. "Just hurry." Warren ran to fetch Mrs. Patterson, the midwife who lived on the other side of town, while Rosalie paced the cabin, breathing through the contractions. By the time they returned, the pains were coming faster and stronger. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. It was painful and exhausting, but Warren stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, and murmuring words of encouragement. Finally, as the sun climbed high in the sky, Rosalie gave one final push and felt the baby slide free. The midwife caught the baby, and after a moment that felt like an eternity, a strong cry filled the cabin. "It is a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket and placing him in Rosalie's arms. "A healthy boy." Rosalie looked down at her son, at his tiny face scrunched up in protest, and felt her heart expand with love so fierce it almost hurt. Warren leaned over her shoulder, staring at their son with wonder written all over his face. "William," Rosalie whispered. "Our William." "He is perfect," Warren said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Rosalie. Thank you for our son." He kissed her forehead gently, and Rosalie saw tears streaming down his face. She had never seen him cry before, and the sight of his joy moved her deeply. Mrs. Patterson finished her work and left them alone with their new son. Warren climbed into bed beside Rosalie, careful not to jostle her or the baby, and they lay together as a family for the first time. "I cannot believe he is really here," Warren said softly, stroking William's tiny hand with one finger. "Our son." "He has your eyes," Rosalie observed. William had opened his eyes briefly, and they had been gray, just like Warren's. "And your nose," Warren said, touching the baby's tiny nose. "He is going to be handsome." Rosalie laughed tiredly. "He is going to be spoiled if you keep looking at him like that." "I cannot help it," Warren said. "I love him already, and I love you so much, Rosalie. You have given me everything I ever wanted." "You gave me everything too," Rosalie said. "A home, a family, a future. I never thought I would have any of this when I came to your shop that day. I thought my life was over." "And now it is just beginning," Warren said, kissing her softly. "For all three of us." The first months with baby William were challenging but joyful. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, though he kept them up at night with his frequent feedings. Warren was a devoted father, happy to walk the floor with William when he fussed, to change his diapers, to simply hold him and stare at him in wonder. The business continued to thrive, with Warren taking on more work than ever. He hired a young man named Thomas to help in the shop, which freed up his time to spend with his family. Rosalie returned to keeping the books and handling customer orders, working from home so she could care for William at the same time. As William grew from an infant into a chubby, happy baby, then into a toddler taking his first steps, Rosalie and Warren's love for each other only deepened. They had built a good life together, full of hard work and simple pleasures, of shared dreams and mutual respect. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Warren surprised Rosalie with a gift. It was a rocking chair he had built, crafted from oak and polished to a high shine with her initials carved into the back. "For you," he said, presenting it with a shy smile. "I know you spend a lot of time rocking William to sleep. I wanted you to have a chair made just for you." Rosalie ran her hand over the smooth wood, feeling the love and care that had gone into every curve and joint. "It is beautiful," she said, tears springing to her eyes. "Thank you, Warren." "Thank you," Warren said, pulling her into his arms. "For being my wife, for giving me a son, for making every day an adventure. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I did not think that was possible." "I love you too," Rosalie said, kissing him, "more than words can say." They stood together in the cabin, holding each other while William played happily at their feet, and Rosalie thought about how far she had come. A year and a half ago, she had been a desperate woman with nothing but pride and grief. Now she had a husband who adored her, a beautiful son, a thriving business, and a future full of promise. As the seasons turned and years began to pass, the Whitmore family grew and flourished. When William was 2 years old, Rosalie became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to the daughter they had talked about, and they named her Catherine after Rosalie's mother, just as they had planned. Little Catherine had Rosalie's red gold hair and Warren's gray eyes, and she was as spirited and determined as her mother. William adored his little sister, following her around and trying to help care for her, even though he was still quite small himself. The cabin had to be expanded again to accommodate their growing family. Warren built an addition with 2 small bedrooms for the children and a larger living area. He also finally built a separate house for them behind the shop, a real 2-story home with a proper kitchen and a parlor, keeping the cabin as additional space for the business. The carpentry business continued to grow, and Warren eventually took on 2 more apprentices. He became known throughout the region for the quality of his work, and orders came in from as far away as Denver and Colorado Springs. Rosalie managed the business side of things, handling all the contracts and finances, and together they built something they could be proud of. When Catherine was 3 and William was 5, Rosalie became pregnant a 3rd time. This baby was another boy, and they named him Samuel. He was quieter than his older siblings, thoughtful and observant, with Rosalie's auburn hair and a serious expression that made him look wise beyond his years. Warren was in his element as a father of 3. He taught William woodworking, letting the boy help in the shop with small tasks. He read stories to Catherine every night, acting out all the characters and making her giggle. He rocked Samuel to sleep, humming old songs his own mother had sung to him. Rosalie watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again. He was patient and kind, firm when needed but always loving. He made time for each child individually, making sure they all felt special and valued. As the children grew, so did the family business. Whitmore Carpentry became one of the most successful businesses in Loveland, employing half a dozen workers and producing furniture that was sold throughout Colorado. Warren never forgot his humble beginnings, though, and he was known for his generosity to those in need. More than once, Rosalie saw him quietly waive fees for someone who could not afford to pay, or provide a coffin for a family in circumstances similar to what Rosalie had faced all those years ago. She never said anything about it, simply adjusted the books to account for his kindness, and loved him all the more for it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren took Rosalie back to Denver for a few days, leaving the children with a trusted neighbor. It was their first time away from the children since they had been born, and while Rosalie missed them, she also enjoyed the chance to be alone with her husband. They stayed in the same hotel where they had first confessed their feelings for each other, and Warren took her to a nice restaurant for dinner. Over wine and candlelight, they talked about their life together, their children, their hopes for the future. "Do you remember that first day you came to my shop?" Warren asked, taking her hand across the table. "You were so determined, so fierce. I knew right then you were someone special." "I remember thinking you were the kindest man I had ever met," Rosalie said, "and I was right. You showed me compassion when I had nothing to offer in return." "You offered me everything," Warren said seriously. "Your trust, your partnership, your love. You changed my life, Rosalie. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and existing but not really living. You gave me a reason to build something lasting, something meaningful." "We built it together," Rosalie said. "Everything we have, we created as partners." "The best partnership I could have asked for," Warren agreed, raising his wine glass. "To 10 years and to 50 more." "To 50 more," Rosalie echoed, clinking her glass against his. That night in their hotel room, they made love with the passion and tenderness of long experience, knowing each other's bodies as well as they knew their own. Afterward, lying in Warren's arms, Rosalie reflected on how lucky she was. She had come to Loveland with nothing, desperate and grieving, expecting to have to beg for help. Instead, she had found a man who saw her worth, who valued her strength and determination, who loved her for exactly who she was. Together, they had built a life beyond anything she could have imagined. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. William grew into a tall, serious young man who was gifted with his father's skill for woodworking. Catherine became a spirited young woman with a talent for drawing and design. Samuel turned out to have a head for numbers and a natural business sense. All 3 children worked in the family business in various capacities, and Warren and Rosalie began to talk about the future, about what would happen when they were ready to step back and let the next generation take over. "William could run the workshop," Warren mused one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "He has the skill and the temperament for it. And Samuel could handle the business side with Catherine doing design work." "They would make a good team," Rosalie agreed. "Though they are still young yet. Let them have a few more years to figure out what they really want." "Wise as always," Warren said, kissing her temple. Rosalie leaned into him, content. They were in their 40s now, their hair showing threads of gray, their bodies bearing the marks of hard work and childbearing. But they were happy, still deeply in love after all these years. When William turned 21, he announced his intention to marry a young woman named Sarah who worked at the general store. Warren and Rosalie welcomed her into the family with open arms, and the wedding was a joyous occasion. A year later, William and Sarah gave them their first grandchild, a baby girl they named Rose after Rosalie. Holding her tiny granddaughter for the first time, Rosalie was overcome with emotion. The circle was complete. She had started with nothing, and now she had a family that extended across generations. Catherine married at 23, choosing a schoolteacher named James who appreciated her artistic talent and independent spirit. Samuel, always the most serious of the 3, took his time finding a partner, finally meeting a quiet young woman named Emma who shared his love of books and learning. As their children married and started families of their own, Warren and Rosalie gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the business. William took over the workshop, Samuel handled the finances and contracts, and Catherine designed new furniture lines that proved popular with customers. Warren and Rosalie found themselves with more free time than they had had in decades. They used it to travel a bit, visiting Denver and Colorado Springs, even taking a trip to San Francisco that left them both amazed by the bustling city and grateful to return to quiet Loveland. Mostly, though, they simply enjoyed each other's company. They would take long walks together in the evenings, go on picnics by the river, spend lazy afternoons reading together on their porch. After so many years of hard work and raising children, it was a peaceful time. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Warren surprised Rosalie by taking her to the cemetery where her mother was buried. The headstone he had carved all those years ago was still there, weathered but still legible. "I wanted to come here," Warren said, "because this is where our story really began. You came to me needing a coffin for your mother, and I wanted to help you. Everything that has happened since, all the joy and love we have shared, it started here." Rosalie felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I think about that day sometimes," she said. "About how desperate I was, how lost I felt, and how you showed me such kindness. You did not just build me a coffin, Warren. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a future." "We gave each other a future," Warren corrected gently. "You were the one who insisted on working for that coffin, remember? You would not take charity. That pride, that strength, that is what made me fall in love with you. You did not need to be rescued, Rosalie. You just needed a partner." "And I found the best one," Rosalie said, taking his hand. "I love you, Warren, just as much now as I did on our wedding day, more even." "I love you too," Warren said, pulling her close. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They stood together by the grave, two people who had found each other in the midst of grief and desperation, and had built a life together based on love, respect, and partnership. It was a love story that had started with a coffin and had grown into something beautiful and lasting. As they walked back through the cemetery toward their wagon, Rosalie looked back one more time at her mother's grave. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered, "for raising me to be strong, for teaching me that I was worth more than pity or charity. I hope you would be proud of the life I have built." She felt Warren's arm around her shoulders, steady and warm, and knew that her mother would indeed be proud. She had survived, she had thrived, and she had found true love along the way. The years continued to pass, bringing the joys and sorrows that come with a long life. They lost friends to illness and old age. They celebrated the births of grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They watched Loveland grow from a small frontier town into a thriving community. Through it all, Warren and Rosalie remained devoted to each other. Even as their bodies aged and their hair turned white, the love between them never diminished. They still held hands when they walked. They still kissed each other good morning and good night. They still looked at each other with the same warmth and affection they had felt in those early days of their courtship. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a large party. The whole town seemed to turn out to celebrate the Whitmores, a couple who had become beloved fixtures in the community. Warren stood up to make a speech, holding Rosalie's hand as he addressed the crowd. 40 years ago, a beautiful young woman walked into my shop and asked me to build a coffin for her mother. She had no money, but she offered to work for payment. I built that coffin, and I would not take a thing from her, because I could see she was struggling. But she insisted on working anyway, and in doing so, she became my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life." He turned to look at Rosalie, his gray eyes still as sharp and loving as they had been 4 decades earlier. "Rosalie, you are the best decision I never made. I never decided to fall in love with you. It just happened, as naturally as breathing, and every day since then has been a gift. Thank you for 40 years of love, laughter, and partnership. Here is to 40 more." The crowd cheered and applauded as Warren kissed his wife, and Rosalie felt her heart overflow with happiness. She was surrounded by the family they had created together, in the town they had helped build, celebrating a love that had endured through decades of joy and hardship. As the party continued around them, Warren leaned close and whispered in her ear, "Do you ever regret it, coming to my shop that day?" Rosalie looked up at him, at the face she knew as well as her own, at the man who had shown her kindness when she had nothing, who had seen her worth when she felt worthless, who had loved her faithfully for 40 years. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Warren Whitmore." "And you are mine," Warren said, kissing her softly, "always and forever." They danced together that night, moving slowly to the music while their family watched with affection. Rosalie rested her head on Warren's shoulder and closed her eyes, savoring the moment. She had lived a long, full life, rich with love and family and purpose. And it had all started with a coffin, a cowboy, and a refusal to accept charity. As the years advanced into their 60s and then 70s, Warren and Rosalie remained active in the community, though they had fully retired from the business. They spent their days tending a small garden, reading and doting on their growing number of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The family business continued to thrive under the management of their children, and the Whitmore name remained synonymous with quality and integrity in Loveland. Warren and Rosalie took quiet pride in knowing that they had built something that would last beyond their own lifetimes. On a warm summer evening, when Rosalie was 76 and Warren 78, they sat together on their porch as they had done countless times before. The mountains were painted purple and gold by the setting sun, and the air was sweet with the scent of roses from Rosalie's garden. "It has been a good life," Warren said quietly, holding her hand. "The best life," Rosalie agreed. "I could not have asked for more." "Do you remember," Warren said with a smile, "how you insisted on paying me for that coffin, how you would not accept any help?" Rosalie laughed softly. "I was so stubborn, but you were stubborn too, refusing to take payment." "I am glad I was," Warren said. "If I had just taken your labor and sent you on your way, we might never have gotten to know each other. It was worth building that coffin for free because it brought you into my life." "You gave me more than a coffin," Rosalie said, squeezing his hand. "You gave me dignity when I was at my lowest. You gave me partnership when I had nothing to offer. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel anything but grief again. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me everything, Warren." "And you gave me the same," Warren said, his voice thick with emotion. "You walked into my shop that day and changed my whole world. I was living a half-life before you, just going through the motions. You made me want to be better, to do more, to build something lasting. Everything good in my life comes from you, Rosalie." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, and the stars began to emerge. After so many years together, they did not need words to communicate. They simply existed together, content in each other's presence. "I love you," Rosalie whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Warren replied, lifting her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Always and forever." They remained on the porch until the night grew cool, then went inside to their warm home, still hand in hand after all these years. It was not a grand ending or a dramatic conclusion, but it was perfect for them. Quiet, loving, and deeply contented. Warren and Rosalie Whitmore lived out the rest of their days in Loveland, surrounded by the family they had created and the community they had helped build. Their love story, which had begun with grief and desperation and a carpenter's kindness, became the stuff of local legend. People would point out the elderly couple walking hand in hand through town and tell newcomers, "That is Warren and Rosalie Whitmore." She tried to trade labor for a coffin, and he built it and would not take a thing. And look at what grew from that one act of kindness. Their children and grandchildren carried on the family business, maintaining the standards of quality and integrity that Warren and Rosalie had established. The Whitmore name remained respected throughout Colorado, a testament to the values the couple had instilled. When Warren passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 83, with Rosalie beside him, the whole town mourned. He was laid to rest in the same cemetery where Rosalie's mother was buried, where their love story had truly begun. His coffin, fittingly, was built by his grandson, crafted with the same care and skill that Warren had put into that first coffin so many decades ago. Rosalie lived for another 2 years after Warren's death, surrounded by her loving family. She never stopped talking about her husband, about his kindness and generosity, about the life they had built together. When she finally joined him, at the age of 80, she was buried beside him under the cottonwood trees, their headstones side by side for eternity. On Rosalie's headstone, her children had carved a simple epitaph that captured the essence of her life. She came with nothing but pride and left with everything that mattered. And on Warren's, he gave freely and loved deeply. Together, the headstones told the story of two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built a love that lasted a lifetime. A woman who needed a coffin but refused charity. A man who built it and would not take payment. And from that single act of kindness and that stubborn refusal to be pitied, a beautiful love story had bloomed. Their great-grandchildren would grow up hearing the story, would visit the cemetery and see the two headstones side by side, would learn about the importance of kindness, dignity, and love. The story of Warren and Rosalie Whitmore became part of Loveland's history, a reminder that sometimes the most profound love stories begin in the darkest moments, and that true love is built not on grand gestures but on daily acts of respect, partnership, and unwavering devotion. In the end, Rosalie had been right to insist on working for that coffin. Not because Warren needed the labor, but because it had given her a reason to stay, to get to know him, to see his character and worth. And Warren had been right to refuse payment, not because he wanted to trap her in his debt, but because he recognized a fellow soul in need of compassion. Their story was one of the Old West at its best: hard work, determination, mutual respect, and love that conquered hardship. It was a story that would be told and retold for generations, inspiring others to look for the humanity in every situation, to offer kindness without expectation of return, and to recognize that sometimes the most valuable things in life cannot be bought or bartered, for they can only be freely given and freely received. The Whitmore family continued to thrive in Loveland for many more generations, always remembering the story of their ancestors. The woman who tried to trade labor for a coffin and the cowboy who built it and would not take a thing, and how that single encounter had blossomed into a legacy of love, family, and community that would endure long after they were gone. And every year, on the anniversary of Warren and Rosalie's wedding, their descendants would gather at the cemetery, bringing flowers to lay on their graves and retelling the story to the youngest generation, ensuring that the memory of that remarkable love would never be forgotten. It was a fitting tribute to two people who had shown that even in the hardest times, with nothing but determination and an open heart, it is possible to build something beautiful and lasting. The story of Warren and Rosalie Whitmore became more than just a family legend. It became a part of Loveland's identity, a reminder of the town's roots and the values that had made it strong. Their names graced the local school that was built decades later, and a plaque in the town square commemorated their contributions to the community. But more than monuments or plaques, their true legacy lived on in the hearts of those who knew their story. It lived on in every act of kindness between neighbors, in every helping hand extended to someone in need, in every partnership built on mutual respect and love. It reminded people that we are all connected, that a single act of compassion can change the course of a life, and that true wealth is not measured in money or possessions, but in the love we give and receive. Warren and Rosalie's story was complete. It had a beginning filled with grief and desperation, a middle full of love and family and hard work, and an end marked by peace and contentment. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would inspire generations to come. In a small town in Colorado, under the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, two headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of a remarkable couple. And if you listened carefully on a quiet evening, you might almost hear the echo of their voices, still laughing together, still planning for the future, still as deeply in love as they had been on that first day when a grieving woman walked into a carpenter's shop and found not just a coffin, but hope, partnership, and true love that would last forever.